Bonjour, hello, and happy Tuesday, everybody. Welcome to the Aqua and Orange Show. I'm Justin Heyer here with Nick Bellato, and this is your one-stop podcast for everything Miami Dolphins. Nick, this is our first episode, our inaugural show of the Aqua and Orange Show. For everyone listening, Nick and I have been podcasting together for almost 2 years. Now. We had a show called the Pick Up the Blitz podcast, and we decided as the new year rolled around that we wanted to go all in on a Miami Dolphins show, something we're passionate about, something we love, and we're excited to bring all of you. So what can you expect from the Aqua and Orange Show? Well, like I said, this is going to be your one-stop podcast for everything Miami Dolphins news, analysis, reactions, all the breakdowns that you need to talk shop at the water cooler, at the bar, on the couch on Sunday, with your friends, with your family, everything you need to talk Fins football. And so we're going to be breaking down all the latest news. We're going to be doing Q&As with questions that you guys send in on Twitter. We're going to be live streaming a lot of our episodes to Twitter, to YouTube. We're going to be doing instant reactions to all kinds of big events, free agency, the draft. We're bringing one of our favorite segments from the Pick Up Blitz podcast, our wildcard question of the day, which you'll hear at the end of this show, to the Aqua and Orange Show. And we're going to be kicking off every show with a little bit of fun trivia, because why not? And we're going to get to that in a minute. But first, Nick, how do you feel about starting this brand new show?
I'm excited. You and I had talked a lot over the last few weeks about doing this rebrand, and I think it's going to be really exciting. I think we've really put together what could be a pretty awesome show, and I'm ready. I'm ready to kick it off the right way. And I love being back on screen with you, Justin.
On video, you can see my beautiful face. I mean,
I've missed it this last year, so it's good to be back on video again.
Speaking of kicking it off, you are kicking it off this week. You're bringing us our trivia question of the week. Hopefully, not too difficult. You're a teacher, as I know too well, having taken your high school history classes, what seems like forever ago. Now at 22 years old, so
not that long.
What do you got for me? What do you got for me for our first trivia question of the show?
So it is a history question. Sorry, it is.
Of course.
I wanted to test your knowledge. It's a little world history. All right, I wanted to test your knowledge on this. What was the largest contiguous empire in history? The largest contiguous empire in history.
Okay. So I took U.S. history with you. Not helpful.
Correct.
Not helpful for this question.
At all. Doesn't help you. The U.S. is wrong if that's your submission.
And it's not my submission. Now, as a business law and marketing major in college, or now almost done with college, also not helpful to answer this question. Okay, I'm gonna go, because I feel like it's a safe answer and like not a stupid answer. I'm gonna go with the Roman Empire.
It's not a bad answer.
Okay.
It's not. It is wrong,
but not the right answer.
It is wrong, but it is not a bad answer. So the correct answer is the Mongol Empire.
Oh, okay. My second thing that came to mind was the Ottoman Empire. I don't know how good of an answer.
Not as big.
That would have been. But
Roman's better. All
right, so I'm 0 for 1 on the trivia. We can keep like a running score tab of next week. I'll bring you a trivia question.
Sounds good.
I'm gonna bring a business law trivia question for you since you went with your
The answer is to sue them. The answer is to sue them. Business law, done.
One of my professors would really appreciate that answer. He says we live in a litigious society. That's what he calls it.
It's true.
He calls it.
For everything.
In the United States, it's probably definitely true. Okay. Now on to Miami Dolphins, because that's what everyone's here for. But you know what? Everyone's also gonna get a little smarter when they watch this show. We're not just Dolphins. We're all just a little bit of your fun fact of the day. Now everyone's can go to work and bring that, and there'll be that guy who brings that question to work the next day. Okay. Obviously, the news of the weekend, the news of the week, the news of the offseason for the Miami Dolphins. Mike McDaniel, former San Francisco 49ers offensive coordinator, now the head coach of the Miami Dolphins at the ripe old age of just 38 years old, seemed to be the fan favorite, the Twitter favorite, the people's choice, if you will, for head coach of the Miami Dolphins. So let's start off with the obvious question, Nick, because of course you can answer this just 2 days into his tenure. Was he the right choice?
Well, given who the options were, yes-ish.
It's a resounding endorsement.
Because, if you look at the full list of candidates who interviewed for the job, then yeah, I would have probably taken McDaniel over all those other ones. But I wasn't a big fan of the initial list to begin with. And I think you and I talked about this at least once or twice. For me, firing Flores, there was only one path to go from there, and that was Jim Harbaugh. And the fact that Jim Harbaugh was not on that list, even if there probably were secret conversations that were being had. If we're being honest about how this works, they talked for sure. I just felt like it should have been Jim Harbaugh. And I wouldn't say I'm bummed that we didn't get Jim Harbaugh, but when I'm looking at the guys on that list compared to the resume that Harbaugh has, I would have liked that because I feel like an experienced coach would have been good for this team. That being said, I do think Mike McDaniel, of all the other options that we interviewed, was the best one.
So, Harbaugh definitely was out there. He interviewed with the Vikings. Ross said in a press conference that there was no way he was going to be the person to bring Harbaugh out of Michigan. But you're right. Once Harbaugh interviewed at Minnesota, I imagine there were all kinds of conversations that were had between Ross and Harbaugh, Ross and Greer and the Michigan exec. Who knows what kind of conversations were had? But you're right. From the complete interview list, the unofficial official list, because the Dolphins actually never released their interview candidates officially. It was all through reports. It was McDaniel, Brian Daboll. Dan Quinn removed himself. Vance Joseph was apparently Chris Greer's choice, but was vetoed by Stephen Ross. So it sounds like it was really between, at the end of it, Mike McDaniel and Kellen Moore. And I think the thing I find interesting about adding Brian Daboll to that discussion, because he was also reportedly one of those final three finalists, is that if Miami wanted to go all in on Brian Daboll, which they reportedly, were really excited about, they probably would have tried to do it when he was going to be hired by the Giants. But it seems to me like Mike McDaniel might have been someone they seemed to view on possibly equal footing, given the fact that they waited to give him that full second interview, that 10-hour tour of the facility interview, see if you're the right guy kind of thing. And from the beginning, McDaniel was one of my favorites. In large part, obviously, because of his connection to Kyle Shanahan. Mike McDaniel followed the Shanahan tree for nearly his entire coaching career, which spans over 15 years in the NFL. Started with Mike Shanahan in Denver, moved around with Kyle Shanahan, Washington, Atlanta, San Francisco. And there's really, unless you're looking at Sean McVay, pretty much no better offensive mind in the NFL than the Shanahan family and Kyle Shanahan in particular. So to me, I would love to see some of that in Miami. Nick, the Dolphins are the longest team, the team that has gone the longest with a top 10 offense. That length of time, since 1995 have they gone without a top 10 offense. And if there's an innovative mind to bring that to Miami, to me, it's from the Shanahan tree. The other thing I love about him, by the way, endorsements up the wazoo this guy has. From George Kittle to Pierre Garçon to Sean McVay to Kyle Shanahan to Robert Saleh, Jimmy Garoppolo, absolutely everybody loves this guy. Now, I acknowledge the fact that they're not going to, give all the negatives out there when he's being interviewed for a head coaching job. But George Kittle at one point joked about having McDaniel's tenure in San Francisco tied to his contract, tied to Kittle's contract. Like that's the kind of love this guy has around the facility. So I'm really excited. And it seems like he's going to be a real collaborative voice in the locker room as well. That seems to be one of his calling cards based on things that he has said in San Francisco press conferences too. So I've been really excited from the get-go.
Yeah, I'm very lukewarm on it, and it's not. I don't think it's anything to take away from Mike McDaniel and what he was able to do in orchestrating that really impressive run game that San Francisco boasted for the last few years. But I don't know. I just feel like I've been hurt before, and I don't want to be hurt again, Justin. And the last few times that Miami has brought in a offensive-minded coach, we haven't done great, right? Adam Gase, Joe Philbin, Cam Cameron, all these people were offensive gurus that stunk long term, right? So I'm hopeful that he can change that narrative. But because of that, because of just kind of the overwhelming negativity around this whole coaching search and everything that happened with Flores and this lawsuit, I'm just kind of like about it. And I hope that he will change my feeling towards it.
And you know what? We kind of got to get to September, and we have to see what he actually does with the offense, with the team on game day. I understand.
Agreed. And I don't want to say
excited.
that. And I don't want to say that I'm not supporting him. Like I give him
right.
he will have all of my support. I hope that he ends up being the guy we expect him to be. But like, I was much more excited about hiring Flores than I was about Mike McDaniel. Okay. If I'm being fair. So because I thought there was something genius about everybody going to get an offensive guy. So Ross went and got a defensive guy. And for the defensive side of it, he was right. It was just the other stuff, didn't work out great.
So if we're looking at what we can evaluate now, what we can discuss now that's, worthy, has merit of getting excited, I think we need to look at two things. One is McDaniel's relationship and how he's going to build around and with Tua, who the Dolphins seem to be going all in on for this year. Presumably, based on their words, obviously, you can never say never in the NFL, but presumably, and what kind of coaching staff he's bringing in. So let's start with that Tua piece first. McDaniel, I'm sure many Dolphins fans have seen the video by now from the private jet on his way to Miami, FaceTimes with Tua, and says something to the effect of, and you know what, I'll quote here actually, we're going to make sure that when you look back on this day, you're going to be like, damn, that was one of the best days of my career, and I'm going to earn that from you, McDaniel said to Tua on the phone. That's been missing from Tua's tenure. A top brass that has that kind of feelings publicly. Obviously, this was videoed, and I'm sure they knew this was going to be out there publicly towards Tua. If you're going to go all in on a quarterback and you're going to say, okay, we're going to invest in this guy, give him a real shot, and we'll talk about how else the team needs to do that soon. I think you need that kind of sentiment. That excited me. Do you feel that same way?
Yeah, I think that's, while I'm still working up to beyond lukewarm of the hiring itself, I think the one thing I am interested in seeing is how him and Tua gel, right? Because, if you look at what San Francisco did over the last few years, they accomplished a lot offensively with Garoppolo as their starting cornerback, who I think you and I both agree is not elite, really by any stretch of the imagination. He's not an elite quarterback. And I think at this point, Tua still has some decent upside. And I want to see what this offense can look like. I want McDaniel to prove that he's not just a byproduct of Shanahan and that he can build an offense in an appropriate way that maximizes Tua's strengths and gives us something comparable to what we saw in San Francisco. Because I think Tua is more talented than Jimmy G is. So I think the offense could be better than what if this guy's for real, the offense could be better than what it was in San Francisco. So I'm excited. I am excited to see how that plays out. But, I don't
Nick's
want to be
not.
the
Nick
Debbie
says you got to
Downer.
show me the actions. It's not about the words. You got to show me. You got to show me. You got to prove it.
I
But
just I just feel like
no, I know.
it's
We've been
going through
burned.
this
We've been
every
hurt.
3 years.
We've been hurt.
It's just every 3 years it gets real old. It gets real old.
No, I get it, Nick. You've been hurt, and you need someone to show. You need someone to really show you the love here, and I get that. I get that.
Mikey M, show me the way.
It's not just about. I will say though, Mikey M. This guy's got a cool personality. He's fun. He's fun. It's been a long time. It's been a long time. Let's be real. Let's go through the past few coaches between Flores, Gase, Philbin. Not a lot of fun. And I get that fun doesn't translate to wins necessarily. I get that. But it's fun to have fun.
It makes the ride a little more enjoyable.
It does. And these press conferences, these sideline mic'd up moments, they're going to be fun. And so at the very least, I think we could take some solace in that. This guy also, like, it just, you get that, like, I want to hang out with him kind of vibe. Sure. Again, I understand that doesn't translate to wins. I get it. But like you said, it makes it more fun to go along with the ride, I'd say,
Yeah, it makes it more interesting because if he's going to have some fun, because you're right. Everybody, Tua included, sometimes there was a little bit of a lack in personality. So I'm excited to see a little bit of color added to the way in which we communicate with others.
So let's talk about how we get how he's gonna to earn the love from you here. And you know what? I think our Q&A is a perfect spot to do that because a lot of the questions we got are how they're going to build this team, maximize Tua, maximize the offense, whatever. So we got some awesome questions here from our listeners on Twitter, even before our first show, which we really appreciate, guys. So we're going to shout you out here, and I apologize if we butcher any of your names, but we're going to do our best. So first question, and I might give sort of a combined question here because we got two very similar ones that I think look at this from two different points of view. From Nick Navas86 on Twitter. With the hire of Mike McDaniel, how do you guys see the Dolphins approaching the draft/free agency as far as players and positions of need? And at Dolphin2334, built on that here, is there one type of player or specifically a specific player that you think the Dolphins need to add either through the free agency or the draft? And this is with obviously McDaniel in mind, with the way this team is going, the way that they're building the roster at this point. Nick, your thoughts on those questions?
Yeah, so I think they're great questions, and I actually just was I put the finishing touches on a piece earlier for Fin Fanatic on this offseason because I think it's not necessarily fair to McDaniel, but I think it's a critical offseason for him because Miami currently, at least as it stands right now, has a really good defense in place. And he will need to make the appropriate moves to not only keep that defense in place, but to rebuild this offense to some degree of competency. So for me, when it comes to free agents and draft, free agents, you got to keep a couple of in-house guys. I think Agba is a guy that we need to keep. I think Kasicki is a guy that we need to keep. I think Landon Roberts is the guy we need to keep. Because I think they're just quality starters, and Roberts is one of those guys who can kind of do a little bit of everything. Jack of all trades, master of none kind of guy, but a grinder, which I think is good for that middle of the defense. So those three for sure. A guy like Nick Needham, I think, is somebody who should be brought back. But like a lot of those other guys could probably go. And then it's offensive line. It has to be offensive line and finding a weapon to pair with Jalen Waddle. And I think, you're talking about free agents, in-house guys, Albert Wilson, Preston Williams, those guys got to go. They got their shot. Time to move on. Use that. Will Fuller. We got to. It's time to get a couple of legitimate weapons. Another legitimate weapon for Tua. So for me, in order, I would go in-house guys, offensive line, weapon, secondary weapon for Tua. That could come in the form of a draft prospect. that could come in the form of bringing over somebody from San Francisco with him, which is, I think, you could have a lot of interesting conversations about that. But I think, I think you bring back Ogba, you bring back Gesicki, and then you just stack the offensive line because, what Shanahan and that coaching tree has been known for is running games, right? And having very athletic in that zone blocking scheme that they've been running. So they're going to need, I think, a pretty big overhaul of this offensive line, not just from a talent perspective, but in a scheme perspective as well. So that's got to be priority because he won't be able to do anything if we don't have an offensive line.
Nail on the head with the running game. McDaniel's known to be sort of the wizard of San Francisco's running game, helped put together a lot of what they do. A huge part of the game planning. In fact, there was a report, and I'd love to credit it. I don't have it in front of me. There was a report that mentioned how McDaniel would often do a lot of the running game scheming early in the week. Shanahan would work with the passing game coordinator, quarterbacks coach, that room, work on the passing. And McDaniel would sort of bring what he had with the running game, and then they'd all workshop that together. This is a guy who needs an offensive line if he's going to produce. Look at San Francisco's offensive line. It's top 10 in most metrics and even higher in others. And you need an offensive line to work that running game. You just do. I don't care how good your running back is. You need an O-line. There's a reason that San Francisco has had a different leading rusher. I think it's like the past 4 years in a row, a different leading rusher, because they just cycle whoever in, and that guy will be one of the most efficient rushers in the league. So offensive line. To me, Terron Armstead, easy target, big name that everyone's going to be going after. New Orleans can't franchise tag him based on the terms of that contract, and I don't think they'll be able to keep him based on the state of their salary cap. Go pay him. Miami is leading the league right now in salary cap space, projected, I believe, for overthecap.com. Go buy a brick wall to let Mike McDaniel run his scheme. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of zone concepts based on the way he ran San Francisco, so I wouldn't be surprised if he's targeting specifically guys who might be more adept at that in particular. But
like Laken Tomlinson?
Laken Tomlinson is a great call. Pending free agent guard from San Francisco, just had his first Pro Bowl season, has missed, I think, one game in his 7-year career. Go grab him, please, for sure.
Whatever he wants.
Exactly. And I want to highlight one more piece, and obviously they're going to be breaking down a lot of free agency over the next couple of weeks, so we don't need to spend too long on free agency in particular right now, but tight end. You mentioned Mike Gesicki, one of the best weapons on Miami's team over the last couple of years. I'd be thrilled if they brought him back. However, the way they use tight ends in San Francisco, the way McDaniel has used tight ends in the running game, I'm not sure Mike Gesicki is the number one choice for that kind of tight end usage. That doesn't mean don't bring him back, but it does mean if he's too expensive, or if there's someone else you like out there, I wouldn't be surprised if he targets someone that fits the scheme better. Now, there's this whole argument about tailor your scheme to your players or tailor your players to your scheme. Like anything in life, it's a balancing act. So I'm not saying that because of McDaniel's scheme, you shouldn't bring back Mike Gesicki. That'd be a very silly thing to say. I just wouldn't be surprised if they do let Mike Gesicki walk, if they then target a tight end who would be really a quality blocker as well. In that George Kittle,
like a Durham Smythe,
I'm not calling him Smythe George Kittle by any stretch of the imagination.
No, but blocker, he's a very good blocker.
But he is a very good blocker, and Hunter Long, by the way, good blocker when he was coming out of BC. So last year's third round pick, I think they'll use him more if I were to guess, especially if they don't bring back Gesicki. That's my 2 cents on that. Now I got to ask you this because everyone's bringing it up. Do you think there's any credence to like McDaniel trying to find his Miami version of Deebo Samuel, or do you think that's a pipe dream kind of thing?
I mean, shoot, he could already have it in Jalen Waddle, right?
I just don't know if he's bulky enough for that. I mean, Deebo Samuel's got weight on Jalen Waddle.
Yeah, that's true. But are you worried in terms of like? are you worried in terms of him like getting hurt or getting beat up? Because Waddle took his fair share of hits this year, and he looked like he was able to take them.
There's definitely the injury concern for sure. It's also whether or not Deebo Samuel breaks tackles like literally no one else in the NFL.
Right, and that's not
Waddle
Waddle's
avoids people like no one
set.
else in the NFL.
Right,
but if he's Deebo Samuel can run down a linebacker, like run into a linebacker and run him over.
Sure.
Not sure Jalen Waddle's doing that. I'd love to see it if they make that work. But people have been talking about Lynn Bowden, who didn't play at all last year and was one of my fan favorites before the year started, and he got hurt. Not sure he's quite bulky enough either. But I think so. One thing I think it's important to note is that just because he had so much success with Deebo Samuel in San Francisco doesn't mean he needs a Deebo Samuel in Miami. Deebo Samuel is one of a kind. And I think it's probably a fool's errand to say, at least in my opinion, that, okay, now you need to find your version of him.
Right. Yeah, no, I don't. It's one of those things where it'd be nice to have, but I don't think it's necessary to have to be successful. Honestly, what Mike McDaniel needs to be successful is an offensive line. Like, that's what he needs. If he wants to run some of those scheme-based plays that they would run with Samuel, with Jalen Waddle, I think it could be successful. I don't think that's. I think you bring up a fair point about the weight, but I think his skill set. I agree with you. I don't know if it's the same as Samuel, but I think you can get away with it, at least for a season or two while you try and build something. But without an offensive line, it doesn't matter. That needs to be the priority. Not finding the Deebo Samuel. It needs to be making sure your offensive line can protect Tua and block for whatever running back is back there.
So let's take that point, because our next question goes right off that. At Cooley and Ton Cooleyington again. Listen, these are the names you guys are giving me, so I'm doing my best. How do you think McDaniel?
It says Carlo Ochoa right next to it, dude.
But I want it at the handle. There could be several at first. There could be several people with that name, but only one guy with that handle. Carlo.
That's
presumed that.
Awkward.
How do you think McDaniel will help the offensive line, and do you think it will get better as a unit?
Well, here's the best thing about that question is that it can't get worse. So literally all you have to do is try. And I'm not saying that, Brian Flores and Chris Greer didn't try, but they didn't try. All you got to do is try on this one. If you can go out and get Tomlinson, your offensive line is going to completely and totally change immediately. If you can find any person that's good at blocking that is superior to Jesse Davis, which, by the way, is about everyone statistically, your offensive line will improve. So you need to, he will be able to help this offensive line by moving away from some of the really, really poor personnel on that roster. Like all those free agents, goodbye. Get rid of all of them, whoever it is.
Leading the league in pressures, like you said, by a large majority. You're right. Like you said, can't get a whole lot worse.
And Tua was throwing the ball in under 2.5 seconds, too, and he was still getting pressure like it was nothing.
Right. And I think another really important point to mention, aside from rotating the personnel on that line, is that San Francisco does not abandon the run, even when they're losing. Yeah. That team will run the ball. And I understand that your offensive line has to be a quality line to have that kind of confidence, but having a coach with that mentality of we're not going to abandon the run, that really helps your offensive line in pass protection, because then the defense can't just tee off and say they're throwing the ball. We don't have to worry about accounting for the running back. Let's just dive right in and absolutely bombard this offensive line with pass rush. That helps your O-line too. So I think even McDaniel's mindset, yes, please rotate the personnel out a little bit, but from what we had last year, but from what Miami had last year. But I think having a coach with a different philosophy also will make a notable difference, providing the team can establish some sort of a running game. So I like that question. And it's almost like we planned this, Nick. These questions are leading right into the next one. At David_Johnson41 asks, would you be interested in Raheem Mostert, or is the injury history scaring you off? Mostert, obviously a free agent now, has had coming out of San Francisco, will be a free agent this March, has had a pretty rough injury history, but when he's been on the field, has been one of the most efficient running backs in the NFL, and some tread on those tires, given the fact that he spent the first half of his career pretty much as a special teams guy. So, what are your thoughts?
No.
Nope.
Very simple. I'm not fully confident in what the team has on the roster in Gaskin, Ahmed. I can't think of his name now. Duke Johnson.
Yeah.
But I think Mostert, as talented as he is, I think his injury history is very concerning. If you can sign him to a 1-year prove-it deal, okay. But if he's looking, and he might be looking, for a decent amount of money because he is getting to an age where his body's going to start falling apart more than it already has, I would pass. Injury history, he's going to be 30, right, if he's not already 30, which we all know is basically the equivalent to 100,000-mile mark on your car. It's the kiss of death. For me, I would rather invest either in the draft or stick with what you got, because Gaskin has shown an ability to be decently effective, especially in the passing game. If Duke Johnson is anything like he was in that last 4 or 5 games, he could be serviceable at least for this next season. I would really like to go a different route with the running back. You got some decent running backs that are there in the draft that you could potentially go out and get. Whether it's Hall or Spiller, I don't know if they'd be available or if you'd be reaching with their pick, but I think there's a better route and a safer route to get guaranteed production than Mostert, who you can't trust to stay on the field.
I certainly am not setting Mostert as my 1A, as my number one option. There's no way. I don't think he's going to command a whole lot of money in the free agent market, given his injury history and age. And so to bring him in as your RB2, RB3, I'm certainly not complaining about that, given the efficiency he's shown in that kind of system. As a Miami Hurricane, I've been watching Duke Johnson for a long time. I love to see him I was so happy to see him get a real shot to be the guy, the bell cow leading the team. And so I'm certainly not opposed to bringing him back as well. Gaskin and Ahmed, they just didn't really show quite enough, I think, to say that they're necessarily going to have a roster lock spot. So I wouldn't be surprised if this is a position with some turnover. I think probably only 1 or 2 of those guys that were there last year. Take your pick. Gaskin, Ahmed, Lindsey, Duke Johnson. I wouldn't be surprised if it's only 1 or 2 of them that stays on the roster. So if you're going to rotate those positions out, sure, bring in Mostert as your RB2, RB3. I like the idea of drafting a running back maybe a little higher than the 7th round for once. The Dolphins haven't done that in quite a while. You rifled off some names, and we're going to do a lot of draft analysis for sure in the coming months and break those guys down. Kenneth Walker is another one I'll throw in there too.
Yeah, I forgot him off the top of my head.
So definitely would be pleased to see some rotating in that unit. For me, if Mostert is one of those guys, sure, why not? He's been efficient in the system, and RB2, RB3. I'll go for it. I'm not investing a whole lot of money there. My guess is it's going to be something like a 2-year, $4 million contract that he's going to command. So
I'm cool with something like that. Like
right,
that's low risk,
exactly,
potentially high reward. That's a fine deal. But if he wants anything over that, I don't think or anything longer than that, which he may. I'm not interested. Kenneth Walker, I apologize for forgetting him. I think he could be really good. And you're talking about Deebo Samuel running people over. He's pretty good at that.
He is absolutely good at that. Would be one of my top choices. I'm excited to go through some mock drafts for the next couple of months. So definitely, if you're a fan who likes some mock drafts, this is going to be your place to get them for sure.
Oh yeah,
over the next couple of months. So before we move on to our wildcard question of the day, everyone's favorite segment, let's talk a little bit about the coaching staff. McDaniel right now. There are all kinds of rumors. We heard from Peter Schrager, from Barry Jackson of the Miami Herald, that Peter Schrager of NFL Network, that There's a potential that McDaniel retains some of Miami's defensive staff, some of Brian Flores' former defensive staff. We're talking guys like Josh Boyer, the D coordinator, Gerald Alexander, the DB's coach, a couple of others is where Anthony Campanile was one of them, Charles Burks, a few names that were floated around. There's also been talk that McDaniel would like to bring in someone like a Vic Fangio, obviously a name that a lot of people know, former Broncos head coach, D coordinator for the Bears a couple of years back. Today, a report came out from The Athletic that McDaniel and the Dolphins are going to interview Charles London, current Falcons quarterbacks coach, former running backs coach in a lot of places, Houston, Chicago, Penn State, and Duke, for potentially the offensive coordinator job. With all that context said, Nick, what do you want this coaching staff to shape up and look like for Mike McDaniel?
Somebody who's going to buy into the system. I think one of the problems that's plagued Miami's offenses, at least these last couple of years, is that we didn't really have what I thought was a clear identity on offense. It was kind of just like, hey, let's just figure it out almost as we go. And I think there's a testament to that is the fact that we have multiple offensive coordinators last season, which was in foresight incredibly dumb, and in hindsight it was incredibly dumb. So anyone who's going to buy in and help build the system that McDaniel wants to build, and someone that's going to be able to work with McDaniel to put the right product on the field. When it comes to the defensive side of things, I'm a little torn because I like the idea of keeping the coaching staff in place, but I have to ask the question, I think you might be thinking it as well, who was responsible for the defensive turnaround? Was it Brian Flores or was it Josh Boyer? Right? And the answer to that question, I think, should determine whether or not you keep the coaching staff, right? The position coaches, I think, are one thing because I think individually the positions did play well, especially the defensive backs. But in terms of overall coordinating the defense, I think you got to really take a step back and identify who was the cause for the turnaround. If it was Boyer, keep him. If it was and keep him if he's willing to stay and work with Mike McDaniel, right? Because you put your eggs in that basket. You need a guy who's going to buy in offensively with him and buy in with his coaching practices and styles if you're the defensive coordinator. So you got to have buy-in, and you got to identify if it was him or not. If it was him, I'd say keep him. I don't see any reason to not, because you want to keep – because I believe that this team is a competent offense away from competing in the playoffs, right? Are they going to light the world on fire? We don't know, but they should. Their defense is ready for that. All they need is their offense to be somewhat competent, and I think they could be in the playoffs next year.
I'm completely on board with you when you say that these guys have to be able to work with McDaniel, and I think the other angle to come at that from is McDaniel should not be – none of these guys should be forced on Mike McDaniel. And these reports that were saying that Boyer and whoever might stick around – we're also saying that McDaniel does have the bandwidth, the room to make his own call. I think that's what's most important here, is that he's confident in whoever he's going to have around him and is saying, Mike McDaniel, of course, comes from an offensive mindset, but this is not a guy who only knows offense. Obviously, when you're coaching offense, you're watching defense. And so a guy who's going to know the defensive side of the ball as well, I'm sure is going to have some ideas in mind and some plans and needs to be able to align with the guys in the room. The other really important point for me here, and something that I think is often missed, is that some of the most successful first-time head coaches in recent NFL history had an experienced mind on the staff. You look at Sean McVay, he had Wade Phillips. You go all the way back as far as Mike Tomlin, he had some very experienced former head coaches on his staff as well. You can look at all sorts of different coaching staffs that hired first-time head coaches. Very often, there is an experienced mind in that room. Matt LaFleur in Green Bay had Mike Patton as one of his defensive minds. Having a guy who can show you the ropes, who can sort of identify some problems before they come up for you as a first-time head coach, I think is really important. And so that's one of the reasons for me. I look at Vic Fangio and I say, not only was he one of the best defensive coordinators in the NFL a couple of years ago, he also just went through a head coaching job where he can probably identify some of those issues for Mike McDaniel and say, look, listen, this is what I did wrong. Don't make that same mistake. So I'd really, as much as I like the idea of defensive continuity, especially if these guys align with Mike McDaniel, I also like the idea of him having some experienced former head coaches, or at least one on the staff who can identify some of those issues.
Yeah, I think that's a really fair point, because you're probably not going to have anybody there with extensive experience. Like I said, if they kept things defensively the way they were and we got the same product, I got no problem with it. But I do think you make a compelling argument about having somebody in the room that's done it before. Now, McDaniel could go out and find someone from the offensive side of the ball, or who's a little bit more offensive minded to help him with that. He could get that in a different way. But I think as of now, the Vic Fangio, if you're hiring him just for his leadership experience, it does make sense.
All right.
And he's a good coach too. I think I was a little underwhelming on his. He's a good defensive coordinator. I just want to on the record.
I'm one of the best defenses in the NFL when he coached the Bears a couple of years ago.
Yes,
so absolutely.
Yes, he did.
All right, Nick. I think it's that time. Everyone's favorite segment, wild card question of the show. Given the fact that the Super Bowl is in just a few days, this coming Sunday, I feel like despite the fact that we often have non-football related questions for this question, just so we can have some fun and talk about some things not football related, I felt it was only right to talk about football. And I mean, who doesn't love combining football with food? And so, Nick, your question for today, you have 3 choices and 3 choices only. What is your optimal Super Bowl food/snack lineup? 3 choices and 3 choices only.
Including drink?
No, you know what? I'll add in a drink for free on the side.
Okay, well.
It's a combo meal, Nick.
It's a combo meal. Okay, I get the drink for free, so that's not a problem. I only get 3. Okay.
And I don't want you cheat. Like you can't like pick a slice of pizza and then add 6 different kinds of
buffalo dip, chicken wings, and pizza.
Yeah. That was fast. What did you just say?
Buffalo dip, chicken wings, and pizza, and I'll be good to go.
Okay.
And I'll be good to go. And then my beverage is, whatever's at the bar.
Yeah, no, that's a solid choice.
That one's easy.
That's a solid lineup. And we're very similar in our lineup. So my initial reaction when I wrote this question down was going to ask you was pizza, chicken wings, and chips and guac. So we're very close.
Okay, yeah.
We're very close on our lineup. Then I thought I might want something sweet, at the end. And so there's a part of me that feels like I might need, whether it's those, the chocolate chip cookies, or for me, my favorite candy, which is M&M's. Me and Roger Goodell very much align on our favorite candy based on his draft.
Peanut or regular? Peanut or regular?
I like both. Whatever you got, I'll have. Right. Those pretzel M&Ms, by the way, which had like a really trendy moment for a second, I really like those too. I haven't seen them around as much. I
don't know what happened, but those are fantastic.
They really are fantastic. And for anyone else who wants an M&M hack, popcorn, and then you pour the M&Ms in when you're watching a movie, it doesn't get any better. It just doesn't. I'm gonna be honest. That is 100,000,000% my guilty pleasure. Throw on a movie, popcorn and M&Ms. You got to pour the M&Ms in though. They get all. It's fantastic. Really, really highly recommend. So the problem that I then ran into was I don't know which of those 3 things I'd sub out. I like wings, but they're not often my go-to at any point other than a football game. So
I was going to say wings.
Which seems sacrilegious for Super Bowl Sunday, but I'm much more pizza and chips and guac than I am the wings.
But you got to think if you're including a dessert, now you have your snack, your meal, and then your dessert with your chips and guac, your pizza, and your cookies. I'm going to skip the dessert. I'm just going to stuff my face with all the other stuff, so I don't need it. By the time the game ends, I'm going to be in food coma, so it's all good.
You certainly you can't go wrong.
With that, I like to for Super Bowl Sunday. I like to do a homemade buffalo chicken dip too, where I do it. I don't go out and get it. Oh, So good.
Go-to pizza on Super Bowl Sunday before we wrap up.
Pepperoni is my go-to pizza all the time. So
Okay. So I
nothing weird.
I'm a classic cheese pizza guy. I'll often throw some grilled chicken or onions on there too, but obviously Super Bowl Sunday you're often sharing with a bunch of people. So just quick shout out though for anyone who's in South Florida. I actually don't know how far out they go, but I know they're in South Florida. Anthony's Coal Fire Pizza, some of the best pizza you can get in South Florida, and you often have to pre-order. So if you're in South Florida and you want Anthony's Coal Fire Pizza for Super Bowl Sunday, we're not sponsored, but we would be if they want to. Definitely give Anthony's a ring. Okay. All right, Nick. I think that wraps up our inaugural episode.
Man, that flew by too.
Flew by.
I just looked at the clock and I just can't believe we've been talking for this long.
It flew by. And guys, thank you so much for listening. We're going to have so much more Miami Dolphins football coming your way. As you can see on the screen, if you're watching the video version, I am at Higher Justin on Twitter. Nick is at OSO6446. I'm at a mission to get him to change that Twitter handle at some point to something a little more digestible and easy to say.
And it's gotta like
it'll be a running thing for the course of this podcast. I have a feeling. Thank you so much for listening. We will be back next week with another Miami Dolphins show. Live streams of these shows will be coming up soon as well. So if you want to watch live and interact with us live, be sure to follow us on Twitter. If you want to have your Twitter handle butchered and shouted out by me when you ask questions for our Q&A segment, be sure to follow us on Twitter so you can send in your questions there as well. But until then, thank you so much for watching or listening, and we will see you all next time.
Thanks, everybody.